Today we're going to be looking at Object Zool Ice, which is the sliding Zool. And this comes into play when we're working with slopes. So we're going to have to figure out all the slopes and then also all the code for the ice part. So if we look at the sprites, let's take a look at our resources. See if we have the sprites available. Here's our Zools. Here's Object Zool slip left and right, like this one here. You'll note that Zool has different angles at which he is standing on a slope. Here's one angle, here's one that's a little steeper, here's flat, and then here's sliding down the other way to the right. So we have 5 different angles of slopes that we're going to have to deal with. The same thing with actually slip left, and you'll note that he has those same angles to deal with. And so we're going to have to one of the angles are either 45 degrees or flat or 22.5 degrees. Those are the angles we're looking at. Now so we're going to go into Object Zool Ice. Let's see if we have that object created. Yeah, there's Object Zool Ice. And we're going to, you can see we haven't done any work in here at all. The default sprite is Object Zool slip right. It's this one. It's probably the first frame of that. So I suppose the first thing we have to do is go into Object Zool and add the draw events for this new type of these Object Zool states. So we go into draw. Here's our draw event, and you can see that slip is not one of them. So we're going to add that to our chained else if statement that we've been using to control how we draw the sprites. What we'll find though is that Z state, this is the Z state is going to be slip. Hopefully we have that one. Looks like we do. And then we're going to change the sprite to slip right. Now the different frames in the animation don't represent an animation, they just represent different angles. So for our frame, we're just going to say frame 0, and then we'll go in and modify that later, and we'll just put it wherever the object is located. We also want to do the same thing for left, so I'm going to copy this code here, and we'll put it down here for left, adding this new state. But instead of right, we're going to change that to left. And now we're set to go. Next we're going to go to Object Zool Land, because we need to be able to transition into this state, or into this object. And we're going to create a new check object action to see if there's a slope beneath us. It doesn't really tell us where to do this though, so let me check my reference game and see where they're doing that. This is in the which event? End step event. And we're going to check that. Let's find that end step event. So here's land, here's end step. Take a look at the code. looks like we're adding this to the bottom here. So let's do that. If place meeting, and here we're saying x. For y, we're saying y plus 1. So we're just looking right below Zool, and we're looking for object slope. So if we have a slope underneath us, then we know that we have to instance change. What are we changing into? Object Zool ice, because we're on the ice. The slopes are icy. And we do perform events. Alright, and that's the last thing we should do there. Alright, now we go over to air, and we're looking at the collision event with object slope, but we notice that we don't have that one yet. I don't see that on the list, so we'll add it. Collision platforms slope. And what do we want to do there? Well, we're going to set the variable y relative to negative speed times 2. It's kind of what we did in the ramp object. So I guess I'll use drag and drop here. So here's our variable. We're changing the value of y. We're making it relative, and what we're setting it to is negative speed times 2. And we multiply times speed instead of just the horizontal speed, because the slope is moving up and down. Okay, so we have that set up. And then so that sets the variable y. And then we want to move to contact, just like we did in ramp. So so here we have to actually execute some code. I go through the same process every time because I can't get the code window to actually appear where you can actually edit it. So I have to close all this just to see it. And finally I have enough room. Okay, so what code are we executing? We say move no, it's not that. It's what have we used in the past? Let me think. Alright, it's move contact. There it is. Move contact all. Our direction is 270. No. Yeah, it's 270. We're moving down. And our maximum distance is -1. We're just telling it to move until it hits something. We said we want to do all things. So I think that's the only 2 parameters. So we move to contact, and then once we're on top of the ice, then we instance change. Instance change to object Zool ice. Performing events when we do. So very similar to what we did in ramps. All right. All right, so we've done all the state transitions now, and now we need to focus on the ice object itself. So here's our object Zool ice. It's the first thing we need to do. Well, first we're going to add a create event. This is going to override the create event on the parent. So here's add event. You say create. And in this event, we're just going to change the friction. So we'll go here and we'll type in friction, see if we can find that. There's friction, so you can say set friction. And we're going to set it really low, 0.25. And that'll make them slip all over the place. Next we add a step, begin step event. And we're going to set the default state, I think. And what we do there is we're going to set it to slip. So we're going to set the variable state. Yeah, state is one of our variables. And the value we're going to set is zState slip. Next thing is we're going to set gravity. There's gravity. We're going to set that to 1. And then we're also going to set gravity direction to -1, which makes no sense at all. And this is the default gravity setting for in the slope is horizontal. So I think, looking at my reference, I think this does not work right. This is a mistake in the reference. So let me just double check that. That's what it says. We're going to leave that there for now. And we're going to see if that's going to cause problems later. But make a note of that somewhere, because we might have to go back and fix this. I'm not confident this is the right setting. All right. Next, we want to set the image index. It has a different name now, I think. But let's see if we can find that variable. Type in image. If I could spell image. Still there, image index. It might have a different meaning now, but for now, we're going to set it to 2. That's the one where Zool is standing on the flat ground rather than on a slope. It's going to be the third frame in the animation, so we're setting that. And then first thing we're going to do is we're going to see what kind of slope we're standing on. So we'll do a check or test variable. Oh, they changed the name, of course. It's this one. No. Yeah, if variable. So what are we testing? We want to see if right below us, well, I don't think it's a set variable. We're gonna have to actually do some code, and so I'll go through my little processor here and try to get it so we can actually edit the code. And again, we're doing a place meeting. We tend to do this a lot. What are we looking for? Well, where are we looking, I guess? Let's see what place meeting has to say. Place meeting, we have x, y, and an object. So our x is going to be just x, and then y is going to be y plus 1. So we're making it relative, hard coding in relativity, I suppose. And what are we looking for? We're looking for object slope underscore u1. Now our problem here is we haven't created this object yet, so that's going to cause us problems. So right now, see how it's grayed out, it's telling us, whoops, that doesn't exist. So we're going to have to make that. If that's true, then we're going to set our gravity. We're going to set gravity equal to 1, and we're going to set our gravity direction. And this is the weird part. So gravity direction. Direction. I think that's the name of the variable. Let's just make sure. Gravity direction equals 202.5. Very specific. I think it pulls us in that direction, so it keeps us in line with the slope, from what I'm understanding. And then what we want to do is, if that's the case, if we're right above object slope u1, then we know which image index we're supposed to need. So we say image index is here. We'll set that to 0. This will be the first frame. And then we'll end the block. Now we're going to have to do similar things for the other kind of slope angles. But I think it's probably best right here because we don't have these object slopes. I like to run things, and you can't run them if they don't exist yet. So it's probably best to stop here and go and make the slopes. So I'm going to do that next. All right, first I need to make the sprites. So let's go to sprites then. These are a type of platform. We've got ramps. We're going to make another group here. We'll say add group, and we'll call it slopes. Inside slopes, then we're going to create new sprites. Our sprite we're going to load, import, and we're doing U1. We'll start with that one. Say open. You can see it's just this kind of slope part here. For our collision mask, we want to say automatic. We want to say precise, actually. And then for, I think these are set correctly, so we'll go with that. But let's change the name of the sprite. So sprite slope U1. It's our first slope. And then we'll just use that slope as our we'll just duplicate that, kind of like what we did with the ramps. And we'll call this one U2. We'll import U2, which is here. That's U2. Duplicate that. And I'll let you do the rest of these, but that's the pattern. Right now I have all my slopes. I've got the U1, U2, U3, and then the D1, D2, D3. Now that we have the sprites, then we can create the objects. Remember, you can't do anything with sprites. You can only do things with objects. So here's platforms. Again, we're going to create a new group. So adding that here. Call this one slopes. Luckily, the group names don't have to be unique, so we can reuse those. In slopes, we're going to create a new object. We're going to call this obj underscore slope underscore U1. We'll use our U1 sprite. So that's here under slopes U1. Looking at our slope, we want to make sure that the parent for the slope is object slope. Let me just double check that. Yeah. So we say parent. We're going to choose object slope. That's one of our parent ones. And that way we don't have to create a bunch of collision events with all the different types of slope. We can just do it with one. And we also want to make this so it's not visible. This is going to be hidden behind some tiles, so no need to make it visible. And then it's not solid, so I think that's all the settings we need. There isn't going to be any events associated with this on this side. It will be maybe on the other side from Zool's point of view. So we have our first one, and we can just use that to create the other ones. So I'm duplicating that, changing the name to 2, changing the sprite to 2. So we're going here, slopes, there. Leaving the parent set to slope. That's all we need. And I'll pause the video here and create the rest of them, and you can do the rest offline. So as I'm filling these in, I noticed that on U2 I made a mistake. Well, I guess I didn't. Okay, so here's U3, and then the next ones we're going to create are D1, D2, and D3. So now I have all my slopes. Now it'd be nice to create a little test slope for Zool to kind of cut his teeth on when we're working with Zool. So I'm going to go into my test room and actually create a slope. So let's go into our room, and this will just be a temporary setup. We'll later go on and put in a real slope, but here's our room editor. We'll go to our room first. And I'm just going to put a slope kind of hanging in the air right here. We have our objects, and so we want to start, maybe if I start the slope right here, I would start at a pretty steep angle, so maybe drag one of these here and maybe start out pretty steep to give us some speed, and then start to flatten out here with D2, and then D3 we want to get a good test of all these angles. So there's D3, and then we can just drag it in an object slope. I think that works, although I'm not quite sure. I think they're all treated the same. And then maybe symmetrically on the other side come up. Oops. I'm going to put two of the steep ones here. And then maybe a platform here so we don't slide off. So, just giving us a place to stand. Okay, so that looks good. This should give us a good test of see how he slides up and down this slope. And then when we write the code, then we'll go and test this. So I'm going to stop the video here. This video is kind of long enough, and then we'll start next time with actually finishing up the coding with the Object Zool Ice.